I'm writing this because I have no other way to speak. The police report just says aggravated assault. They don't understand. They can't. Before all this, my voice was my life. It was more than my life, it was my purpose. Every day, I'd find a corner in this sprawling, indifferent city, and I would preach. I'm a young man, and I know how it looks. Some people would scoff, others would hurry past, but some would listen. I never shouted fire and brimstone. I spoke of hope, of finding light in the cracks of this concrete jungle. My voice was a bell. It was strong, resonant, a gift I believed was given to me to share. I could feel the words vibrate in my chest, a physical force I could project across a busy square, cutting through the traffic and the noise to reach a person who needed to hear it. That feeling, it was like being truly alive. That all ended a month ago. It was a Tuesday. I'd finished late, my throat raw but my spirit soaring. I'd had a good day, a few people had stopped to talk, to share their burdens. I was walking home, taking a shortcut I'd taken 100 times before. It's a narrow alley, poorly lit, that spits you out a block from my apartment building. It always felt like a little secret passage, a moment of quiet between the roar of the main street and the hum of my residential block. That night, the quiet was different. It was heavy. Predatory. He was just a shape in the deepest part of the shadow, halfway down the alley. I only saw him when I was almost on top of him. My first thought was of a homeless man, and my hand instinctively went to my wallet, not out of fear, but to give him what little cash I had. "God bless you, brother," I started to say. The words died in my throat. He wasn't a homeless man. He was wrong. Gaunt is the word, but it doesn't do him justice. It was like his skin was a size too big for the bones beneath, stretched tight over a frame that seemed impossibly thin. His eyes were just pits of shadow in the dim light. There was a smell, too, like damp, turned earth and old paper. He moved faster than I could react. One moment he was a shape, the next his hand was clamped on my arm. It was shockingly cold, a dead, bloodless cold that seeped right through my jacket. I did what anyone would do. I opened my mouth and I screamed. It was a good, solid scream, born of pure terror, full of all the power I put into my sermons. It should have echoed off the brick walls and brought people running. But it wasn't. The man, this stick figure of a person, didn't flinch. He didn't try to silence me. Instead, he leaned in, his face inches from mine. And as I screamed, he did something I still can't comprehend. He inhaled. It wasn't a normal breath. It was a deep, rattling, impossible inhalation, a vacuum. I felt it. I felt my voice, the very sound and force and vibration of it, being pulled from my lungs, torn from my throat. It was a physical sensation, like a string being yanked from the core of my being. The scream thinned, wavered, and then, nothing. It was just gone. My mouth was still open, my lungs were still heaving, but there was no sound. Only a terrifying, profound silence where my voice should have been. The man straightened up, a flicker of something like satisfaction in his shadowy eyes. He didn't take my wallet. He didn't touch me again. He just released my arm, turned, and melted back into the shadows at the end of the alley. I stood there for a long time, trying to call for help, trying to make any sound at all. I could breathe, I could cough, but the part of me that made noise was just gone. It was like trying to flex a phantom limb. The machinery was there, but the signal wasn't connecting. The first few days were a blur of panicked visits to doctors and specialists. I carried a small notepad and a pen everywhere. I was mugged. I screamed and my voice just stopped. They looked at me with pity. An ENT specialist threaded a camera down my nose and into my throat. He showed me the monitor. "Look," he said, pointing. "Vocal cords are perfect. No swelling, no paralysis, no nodes. Physically, there is absolutely no reason you shouldn't be able to speak." They gave it a name, conversion disorder. Severe psychological trauma manifesting as a physical symptom. My mind, they said, had been so shocked by the attack that it had switched my voice off to protect me. It was a plausible, scientific explanation. It made sense to everyone but me. I went to my mentors, the older preachers who had guided me. I sat in a heavy oak chair in a quiet study, the air thick with the smell of old books, and scribbled my story onto a legal pad. They read it, their faces etched with concern. "The enemy works in many ways, my son," one of them said, his own voice a comforting baritone. "He seeks to silence the messengers of the Lord." This was a traumatic event. The shock has stolen your tongue for a time. You must have faith. Pray. Rest. Let God heal your mind, and your voice will return. Psychological. Everyone agreed. I was the victim of a violent crime, and my mind had broken in a specific, unusual way. I tried to believe them. I really did. I prayed. I rested. I filled notebooks with my silent sermons, with my desperate pleas to God. But I knew what I had felt. It wasn't my mind breaking. It was a theft. I felt the void inside my chest where the resonance used to be. It was a hollow space, an emptiness that ached with silence. Life became a quiet nightmare. The world felt like it was behind a pane of glass. I couldn't work. I couldn't preach. I couldn't even order a coffee without the awkward dance of pointing and writing. I was a ghost in my own life, my very identity ripped away from me. The silence was the loudest thing I had ever experienced. Then, exactly 1 week after the attack, the real horror began. I was in my apartment, trying to read. The window was open, letting in the night air and the distant sounds of the city. At first, it was just a murmur, a sound on the edge of hearing. I almost dismissed it as a car radio or a passing argument. But there was something about the cadence, something familiar. I went to the window and leaned out, listening. The sound rose and fell, carried on the wind. And then I heard it clearly, a single phrase echoing from a few streets over. "And I tell you, your neighbor's compassion is a weakness you can exploit." I froze. A cold sweat prickled my entire body. It was my voice. There was no mistaking it. It was my pitch, my timbre, my particular way of drawing out certain vowels when I was making a point. It was the voice I had used every day to speak of love and forgiveness. But the words were poison. They were a vile, twisted mockery of everything I had ever preached. I grabbed my keys and ran out of the building, my heart hammering against my ribs. I sprinted down the street, chasing the sound. It seemed to be coming from a small park 2 blocks away. But by the time I got there, breathless and frantic, there was nothing. Just a few people walking their dogs, a couple on a bench. The park was quiet. The voice was gone. I tried to tell myself I was hallucinating. Auditory hallucination, a symptom of the trauma. That's what the doctors would say. My mind was playing tricks on me, creating a phantom of my lost voice. It made sense. But the next night, it happened again. This time it was closer. It sounded like it was coming from the rooftop of the building across the street. I stood at my window, listening, my blood turning to ice. Look upon the desperate and see not a soul to be saved, but a tool to be used. Their hope is a currency, and you should spend it freely. It was my voice, but it was being used to preach a gospel of pure, undiluted evil. It spoke of selfishness as a virtue, of cruelty as a strength. It was a sermon from hell, delivered with the same passionate, convincing tone I had once used to bring comfort to the lost. I watched the rooftop for half an hour, but saw no one. The voice just preached its filth into the night air, and then, as if a switch had been flipped, it stopped. Every night after that, it got closer. One night, it was from the alley behind my building. The next, it was from the street corner right below my window. I'd rush down, but there was never anyone there. It was a ghost. I was starting to unravel. I wasn't sleeping. I'd sit in the dark, by the window, waiting, dreading the moment I'd hear myself start to speak. My friends and mentors from the church would check in on me. I tried to explain, scribbling frantically on my notepad. I can hear my voice. Someone is using it. It's saying terrible things. They'd share those same looks of pity. It's the trauma, they'd say gently. Your mind is trying to process what happened. Perhaps it's a manifestation of your anger, of your fear. They thought I was losing my mind. And to be honest, I was starting to believe them. Was this my new reality? Trapped in silence, haunted by a twisted version of myself? Last night, I decided I couldn't live like that. Crazy or not, I had to confront it. When the voice started up, closer than ever before, seemingly from the very same alley where I had lost it, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the heaviest flashlight I owned and went out to face my ghost. The alley looked exactly the same, and the voice, it was here. It was loud, bouncing off the walls, a torrent of beautiful, persuasive, horrific words. For true power lies not in lifting others up, but in the certainty that you can push them down. It was coming from the far end of the alley. And as I crept closer, my flashlight beam cutting a nervous path through the gloom, I saw him. It was the same gaunt man. The same scarecrow figure. He wasn't alone. He had someone cornered, a young woman, pressed back against the brick wall. She was staring up at him, her eyes wide, but not with terror. It was more like fascination. She was mesmerized. The voice was pouring out of him. But his lips weren't moving in sync with the words. It was like a badly dubbed movie. The sound, my sound, was emanating from his chest, a perfect, seamless broadcast of my stolen voice, twisted to his purpose. My blood ran cold, but then a different fire ignited in its place. Righteous anger. The kind of fire I used to channel into my sermons. I am a shepherd, and this was a wolf among the flock. He saw me then. The flashlight beam caught his face, and his hollow eyes locked onto mine. The voice cut off abruptly, plunging the alley into a sudden, shocking silence. The woman blinked, as if waking from a dream, and a flicker of real fear finally crossed her face. The gaunt man tilted his head. He didn't seem surprised to see me. A dry, rasping sound, like dead leaves skittering across pavement, escaped his throat. It might have been a chuckle. Then he spoke, and this time, the voice was his own. It was a whisper. You came back. The fire in you is strong. It seasons the sound. He knew. He was talking to me, but he seemed to understand my silent questions. I took a step forward, raising the flashlight like a club. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I couldn't let him hurt that woman. You wonder how, he rasped, his eyes never leaving mine. It's a gift. I take the instruments of conviction. The preacher's sermon, the politician's promise, the lover's whisper. I drink the sound, and I use the leftover faith to draw them in. He gestured with his chin toward the woman, who was now trembling. They hear a voice they want to believe. They come closer. Their walls come down. It makes the rest so much easier. I had no voice to shout a warning. I had no words to condemn him. All I had was my conviction. In a single, desperate motion, I did the only thing I could. I threw myself at him. I'm not a big man, and he was unnaturally strong, but the surprise of the attack was enough. I slammed into him, and we both went down in a tangle of limbs. Run! I mouthed at the woman, a silent, desperate scream. For a second she was frozen, and then her survival instinct kicked in. She scrambled away, her footsteps echoing down the alley as she fled into the night. I felt a flash of triumph. It was short-lived. The thief threw me off him with an effortless, terrifying strength. I landed hard against the brick wall, the air knocked out of me. Before I could recover, he was on top of me, one of his cold, skeletal hands wrapped around my throat. He leaned down, his face once again inches from mine. The foul, earthy smell was overwhelming. A pointless gesture, he hissed, his voice a dry rustle in the dark. Your flock has scattered. And the shepherd is about to be devoured. His grip tightened, and I felt my consciousness start to slip. He was laughing, that same dead leaf sound, and then he opened his mouth. I will see it in my nightmares for the rest of my life, however long that may be. It wasn't a mouth anymore. It stretched, unhinged, widened, the flesh pulling and distorting in a way that defied all physics, all biology. It kept opening, wider and wider, until his entire head seemed to be nothing but a gaping maw, a perfect circle of absolute, starless black. It was a hole in the world. I could hear a faint, high-pitched ringing coming from it, a sound that seemed to pull at the very edges of my soul. He was lowering this void down over my face, and I knew, with a certainty that went beyond terror, that he was going to consume me. Not just my body, but everything I was. And then, a sound of a siren cut through the darkness. It started faint and far away, but it grew louder, closer, wailing through the night. The thief froze. The black hole of his mouth receded, snapping back into the shape of a thin, bloodless line. A look of pure annoyance crossed his gaunt features. With a final, contemptuous hiss, he released my throat, scrambled to his feet, and was gone. He didn't run. He just faded into the deepest shadows at the end of the alley and vanished. I lay there, gasping, dragging in ragged, silent breaths, as the police car screeched to a halt at the mouth of the alley. The woman I'd saved had found them. Of course, they didn't believe the real story. They found me battered and bruised, and the victim hysterical. To them, it was just a mugging gone wrong. An attempted assault. The woman tried to explain about the voice, about how she felt like she was in a trance, but they just nodded and wrote it down as a symptom of shock. When they asked me for my statement, all I could do was pull out my little notepad. They called in a psychologist from the Victim Services Unit. They were kind, they were professional, and they were completely useless. So here I am. My throat is bruised, but the doctors say I'll be fine. Physically. My voice has not returned. I know it won't. It's still out there with him. I'm writing this because I'm a preacher, and a preacher's job is to spread the word. This is my new pulpit. This is my new sermon. That thing is still out there. He's hunting in my city, and he's using my voice to do it. He might be hunting in yours, too. So please, I beg you, listen. If you're walking home at night and you hear a voice from a dark street, a voice that sounds impossibly trustworthy, impossibly convincing, a voice that speaks of hope but makes you feel a creeping dread, run. Don't listen. Don't let the words take root. Because it might be a politician's promise, or a lover's whisper. Or it might be mine.